Welcome to the Behind the Racquet Pod, the podcast taking you behind the racket with today's top tennis players and biggest issues facing the sport.
Behind the Racquet is a community to give fans and players in the world of tennis the opportunity to open up like they have never done before.
Visit BehindTheRacquet.com for the latest stories, merch, as well as direct links to all of the latest podcasts. It can also be found on iTunes, Google Play, Pandora, Stitcher, and wherever you find your podcasts. Download the episodes and make sure to leave a review.
And we want you to be a part of the conversation. Find me at Noah Rubin 33 or Mike at Mike C Tennis on all forms of social media. You can also learn more at BehindTheRacquet.com or MikeCTennis.com.
Special thanks to my sponsor, New Balance. Visit their latest shoes and styles at NewBalance.com and learn more about their program of giving back at #NBGivesBack.
You can also help support the podcast by visiting patreon.com/BehindTheRacquetPod and receive rewards from our travels around the world. And now,
Ryan Koppelman, welcome to Behind the Racquet podcast. How are you today?
Hey man, I'm glad to be here. I love talking about tennis, and thrilled to talk to you, dude.
First of all, I see back left the Billions poster on there. I just watched again. Not only am I watching the new season, I also started rewatching it while I was on the plane. It is one of my favorite of all time.
Love it. And this is the first podcast that I've been able to be on where I can actually talk about Billions because the writer's strike got settled. So for the last obviously I've talked about it a ton over 7 seasons, but this season, I have not been able to talk about it publicly because in solidarity with my union, we were not promoting any of the shows. So I love that you love the show. I love this season, and yeah, people should dive in. There's been tennis in the show. If you dig sports, if you dig tennis, there's lots of references, lots of stuff throughout, and Maria Konnikova shows up in the show. So yeah, it's for fans of drama, but also for sports fans.
Yeah, no, that whole Actors Guild and everything, that's all settled now. That was a few days ago, right? Or yesterday?
Yesterday. The Writers
Yeah.
Guild, the actors, right. The screen actors are still have to settle theirs, but I'm encouraged that they'll get end up getting a fair deal. But we as screenwriters and television writers were able to make a deal. And so yeah, we can talk about anything you want.
That's amazing. But before we go into Billions and all the amazing Emmy award-winning stuff that you've done, tennis. This is why you're here. This is why you're on this podcast right now. Where did your love for tennis begin? Who was the first person to introduce you to tennis? What was that like?
Yeah, I have been playing tennis my entire life. I can find there are pictures of me trying to get in a good sort of serve return ready position from when I'm 4 or 5 years old, I think. And from the first time my dad took it up late in life. He was a good athlete, but he didn't play tennis. He grew up playing tennis. He grew up playing sports that were easier to play, easier to get access to, easier to afford, all that stuff. And I think he and it felt like tennis would make sense for me in certain ways. I always, the big thing that all of us are kind of imperfect athletic specimens, some fewer imperfections, and they go on to be serious athletes. But so my hand-eye relative to everything else, I have very good hand-eye and always have had that. So I can really, shoot a basketball and I have good touch at any kind of sport. I'm not very fast. And when I was young, I really wasn't fast. And parts of that were really hard for me. But so I think that the idea was this, hitting a ball and understanding how to even put spin on it even before people were hitting with a Western grip. That kind of made sense. And I loved it. I wasn't somebody who was great at it early. But right from the beginning, I could hit the ball and rally. And that's you get that little bit of encouragement when you're young at a sport, which was right from the beginning, I would be sorted into I was never anywhere the best player, but I would always get sorted into the top group. Right, what I mean? Because I could play. I could just,
you had the athleticism for it. You were in it.
My particular
skill set
just worked to, be able to kind of hit a tennis ball. But I loved it too. I loved everything about the way I couldn't have articulated it this way, right, as a kid. But what tennis requires of you and I was much worse at it when I was young too. But the way, it combines my other favorite sports to play probably are basketball was always, and those are my two when I was young, and golf.
Mm-hmm.
And I think tennis gives you so much of what you get at a basketball in terms of what you have to be able to present physically, the kind of work you have to do, the hand-eye stuff, but also because you're out there alone, and because of the understanding the patterns and understanding how often it's really just on you to be able to put the ball in play. It requires the kind of emotional and mental mastery over the self that golf does. And it's so difficult. This is why one of the reasons I love it is realizing that it's hard to do that. That even if you practice a lot, you might miss a short forehand. You might be pressing and worried that the opponent's going to pass you, and so you might hit it too hard. You might be scared that you're going to hit it out and you baby it and get past. And all these things you try to get in this state of flow. When I was a kid, Johnny Mack was the person we idolized, and he was the first person to really talk about the zone. And but it is true that anyone who's played tennis at whatever level you play it at, and again, I'm not a great tennis player. I'm just someone who loves tennis, but I've played enough that I've had those moments where the racket's an extension of the self, where you're not thinking, right? Where you're thinking well enough to know how to manage the point, but you're not, your conscious mind is not worried about consequences, and you are in that state of flow. And Noah, that for a guy as great at tennis as you are, and I know at every level, like the moments in the zone, it's basically we all get the same amount of time in the zone. It's just how effective you can be in the zone for you. And so tennis just always offered that. Like I said, when I was a kid, and it's really something that's frustrated me, even to think about. I played number two mostly, or number three singles for my high school. But I was really bad at dealing with adversity on the court. I had such high expectations on myself. I had these demands of myself. And when I would fall short of it, I really was terrible at staying. Like I kind of was strategically always pretty decent. But if you can't tactically do it, the strategy doesn't matter. And because I had no emotional mastery on the court, or there were enough times I didn't, it was really frustrating. And I quit the game for like 15 years. Because there were days that I played, there were days when I could beat people levels who were much better than me.
The consistency.
I just couldn't do it mentally. And it made me go like, yeah, there's other things to do. When I picked the game back up in a serious way, that stuff was gone and the expectations were gone. And now it's just even now when I'm nervous or it's hard to feel like I'm swinging free, I'm not angry with myself. I'm learning. I'm curious. I'm engaged in that process. I'm trying to solve it. And I don't want to throw a racket. I have none of those, like that stuff somehow got left behind. And so it's just an incredibly joyful thing. Really hard and disappointing. I'm not saying I'm not
it's not affecting your life as much.
Yeah, I can still get mad at myself afterwards, but I'm saying it's become like the reapproach to the game now is I just always want to be out there, playing.
So we'll talk about Jimmy Connors in a second, but what brought you back to tennis during that hiatus? I mean, what was that initial bring?
Like I would say I didn't, yeah. So I would say like I truly, really hardly ever played from, like in college, I played basketball every day. And then, okay, I played a few times a year, but I didn't play. And then I would say like from post-college, I bet I played twice a year for 15 years, and I got into my mid to late 30s.
Are you watching tennis at this time at all?
Yeah, I never stopped watching tennis.
Okay, so you're still a fan of the sport. Okay.
I could have. There's never been a time that I couldn't like really talk about many, many players in the top 50, and that I couldn't even if I had to like go imitate their serve or whatever, or the stroke. Like I'm a really active tennis fan, but we had children, and that's part of what got me back into it. My son would play, so I'd play with him. And then, but I still, then, work gets in your life, and it really wasn't until just maybe the summer before the pandemic that, again, I would go through little periods of playing, and we made the Connors documentary. Well, what happened? I started playing again then. I'd forgotten this. Right around then, I played a lot, and then I blew up my calf. And then that put another 10 years on it where I just basically didn't play. And then pandemic, I realized this is something I can do. There were friends who had a friend of mine at a court, and then another. So I started playing, and then I met up with an old friend who happened to be where I was, and we kind of decided to bubble together. His wife and Amy and we were all kind of, and he and I, there was a little right near where I was living. There was a single bubble, and I would go with my friend, and I would go with Sam, my son, and we would just play. And I ended up playing like 5 days a week. And
that family environment, and yes, to bring that.
And then
back.
there was a pro. I'm going to shout him out. If he's this guy named Steve Guernsey, who's upstate New York in like kind of Rhinebeck, Poughkeepsie, and north of there, Germantown. He's a great player and an incredible teacher. And it was the most fun thing, though. So this is now 3.5 years ago, and he rebuilt my forehand. He was like, "You're up here. If you want to do this, like, I can really show you the modern forehand, and it'll take 4, 5, 6 months. But at the end of this, you will have the windshield. You will have the modern forehand. And if you really work at it, and it's going to suck for you, and you're going to miss a lot of balls, but you're going to have a weapon that like nobody 57-year-old who is not a 5.0 will have." And I was like, I'm so in, because it was so great to have a project like that.
There was a process for you, yes, which is right aligned with everything you do.
2-3 times a week, I could show up and really. And then when I would play with Josh, my friend, or my son Sam, I was working on the forehand. And I will tell you, dude, it's amazing how breaking that stroke down and focusing on that, and then rebuilding it and working on that, gave me such mental freedom, clarity, right? That kind of focus, like everything else kind of goes away. All the stress of the thing.
So zen. Hour. Yes, incredible. It's completely zen at that point.
And then the result is that my forehand now at 57 is just better than it's ever been. I really can crack that thing. And it's super fun to have like a little weapon that I didn't know I had at this age.
So you've gone through these like ebbs and flows of tennis, but going back to the Jimmy Connors, this is what they want. What was the motivation behind that, for sharing that story? How did that come across your desk? Kind of go through that process a little bit.
I'd love to. So part of my tennis obsession as a kid was that I worked at the US Open for 3 years when I was 16, 17, and 18.
What are we doing there?
And it was an incredible gig. This was the deal back then, and there was like very little security. So you could just get out onto the courts. You could bring your rackets. Like I hit on all the courts, because you got the little badge that got you in. So I sold clothes at the Alessi booth, but the deal was they would pay you, I don't remember the exact numbers, but let's say they paid you $10 an hour. They would give you $20 an hour in Alessi gear. So you could get twice as much. And then you were set up for the year for your tennis.
Fully in Alessi gear. You look like a pro.
Yeah, well, of course.
Yeah,
of course. And then also they would throw you stuff because you're there every day, setting up, and you're closing, and you're there from before the place opens till it closes
15 hours.
down.
Yeah.
And you get to know everybody. You also get to know the security guards. You get to know sneak into the players lounge and it was just an incredible thing to be 15, 16. It was 15, 16, 17. And it was just an incredible thing to be in that environment at that place. So I had this love for the Open, right? And for everybody and the culture of that place. And I never stopped going. I would go every year. For a long time after that, I knew so many people then. Of course, I didn't anymore. But when Bill Simmons was talking to David Levine, my creative partner, and me about 30 for 30s, I remember Levine and I were texting with Bill. We were on an airplane flying somewhere, and Phil was like, what would you guys want to do for season 2? If you want, I'd love to have you do something. And I just looked at Levine and immediately we were just like, yeah, Connors and, Connors in 91, the comeback. And Bill immediately said, yep, go see these guys at ESPN next week when you're back in New York and let's make this happen. And then we were off and running. And by then, because of what I did for a living, I had some pretty deep contacts and friends, and some friends of mine, Chris Fowler and Mike Lupica, both reached out to Jimmy and told Jimmy that I was Dave and I were both like really legit tennis people, that we would treat him fairly. Spoke to Jimmy a bunch and he agreed to do it. And it was really an incredible time to get to be around my, these heroes from my childhood and ask them questions. And, I loved Crickstein. If you're my age and you were a Jewish kid on Long Island, like somehow Bloomfield Hills, where he was in Detroit, was basically like the Midwest version of Long Island. And Crickstein was really important to you. And so getting to do that was an amazing experience.
Yeah. And for you, do you remember watching that live? The comeback of Connors after his hiatus? What was that kind of emotion?
Every single every match. I mean, we remembered every match. I didn't remember. I didn't watch the Harhus match when it happened. I had forgotten about the overheads. I had forgotten about that match. But other than that, I knew everything that happened in every match. Somehow, I was in law school then at night, and I think however it happened that I missed that one match. But I remember every beat of the Patrick match, and I remembered every beat of the Cricker match. I knew all the stuff that happened. I didn't know all the interpersonal drama. I didn't know, for instance, that Johnny Mac, as soon as Jimmy broke a second time, Johnny Mac went to sleep and knew his little brother was going to lose. I had no idea that. And I was pretty friendly with Patrick.
Okay.
But we had never talked about it. It's not the kind of thing you bring up. But when there was the camera and the mic, I could bring it up.
Bring it up.
He would talk to me.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. And just to, for you, as your tennis love has developed in so many different things as years went on, how have you tried to incorporate that into kind of some of the projects that you've done? Obviously, you have Cornucopia and Billions, and you have a few other pieces. And then also, poker's been such a huge party of Rounders, which is an amazing movie. And how has that competitive spirit in you kind of led to some of these films and series that you've worked on?
I don't know if I can draw a straight line other than to say, one thing that absolutely appeals and has always appealed to us about David and me about tennis is, these people who are out there with everyone looking at just them, and they have to find a way to access the best part of themselves, the truest part of themselves, the gunslinger part of themselves, to perform and succeed against sometimes really long odds is, pretty similar to what a poker player has to do. And pretty similar to what someone who's a United States attorney has to do, or someone who runs a hedge fund and has to make these giant decisions. People who put it all on the line, people who have an unrealistic dream, but then work toward that unrealistic dream with an incredible amount of rigor and perseverance and discipline and focus. And so those things, I think, are across the work. And look, Dave and I are both sports fans. Dave's really great at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and he's done all sorts of things like that. And, I've played sports my whole life. And so I think there is something, and I still at this age hate playing doubles. And I love playing basketball on a team. And I love playing baseball on a team, but I want to play singles when I play tennis. I want to be out there and know that if I want to try to hit a kick serve hard at out in a big game, that I'm not fucking anyone else. I'm not fucking anyone else over if I miss it long. If I go really try to hit it hard, and
but you get the glory as well, though. You get the glory as well. If it does go well, it's on you. It's that all in kind of feeling, which it's funny. So my co-host, who absolutely loves you, and is the first podcast he couldn't make, he's actually commentating a challenger match right now. And he's a big poker player himself, and he's tied a lot of similarities between poker and tennis that understanding of the mental aspect, what goes into it, playing your own emotions, the players around you. And tennis is that all or nothing game.
Well, knowing what you should do versus what you actually do, which in tennis happens all the time. Like I got to hit with BG a few times a couple of years ago. And, the way it's so clear, like when you talk to him, he'll say, like take that example. He'll say, 30-40 is not really the moment to crack a second serve. You hit a big spin. He's like, you do that scoreboard math, but you're in the heat of the battle and you're amped up and you just missed the first serve by this much and you're gassed and you're adrenalized. And sometimes you know what you're supposed to do, spin it in, come to net behind it, make him hit a shot and pass you, put the pressure on. But so you have to constantly recenter, know where you are, take a deep breath. Poker's, I play a lot of poker and that stuff. Knowing the move you should make, but being able to make that move with the pressure on,
resisting.
You learn. Well, you learn. But you learn so much about yourself. I told you I played in a club tournament a couple weeks ago, and it was amazing how tight I was. And I realized it was because I went in as the favorite in that match, and the guy I was playing was in better condition than me, and he had good strokes. But it was clear that I was the favorite in the match, and the pressure of that. For what? It's a club tournament that nobody cares about in the world. And the guy who, if I won 3 matches and got to the finals, the guy I would have played in the finals is top 100 in the over 50s. He was going to, or the whatever. He was going to just beat me 2-1. So but I felt tight, and I felt tight for like a whole set and I did fine. I won the match, but like feeling that and then finding a way to execute anyway is an amazing, and it gives you such empathy for the players when something's really on the line. Because there I was at this place I played a million times on a surface. It was clay, outdoors on a beautiful morning. And, like you play enough. One of the nice things, and I would say to anyone, like one of the nice things when you play a lot and you work on your game is, and it's any achievement, like it's like there is a floor where at different times you don't have it but when you're playing a lot, and that's a great source of comfort. It's like, I can hit, I'm not really going to miss. Like I'm going to hit my forehand. Like that's going to be fine. I'm not going to just tank it. But when you're tight, even so, suddenly your forehand that really does land between the service line and the baseline most of the time is just landing at the service line because you're tight and you're short arming it just a little. Meaning you're not going to just hit into the net. You're not going to. But you're nervous and you're going to kind of swing hard, and your body's a little out of sync and the thing's going to land mid-court. And that means that guy can come in and put pressure on you. And suddenly you're playing defensively. And this is what's so great about tennis, right? Because you got to go, all right, well, I can be really pissed about that. Or I can just now play the point from that spot. And it's not what I expected the point to be, where I'm in control and I'm pushing him back and then I'm moving him. Okay. How do I what do I have to do to stay in the point? How do I hit one more shot? How do I think through this question? How am I still noticing and staying really curious about what shots okay, if I'm nervous, he's nervous, even though he's the underdog. Okay, what shots does it seem like he doesn't want to hit? How can I just chip the ball? Can I chip the ball to his backhand in a way that he's not comfortable? And that is like when you get to a place of tennis where you have the strokes, again, not on a level, I'm not saying I'm 5-0, I'm not a 5-0 player, but where you have the strokes where you could play with anybody, then it's all these other questions. And that's what's so amazing to me about tennis.
No, you seem so open the way you speak about emotions on and off the court. It's extremely thoughtful. But I've read that you worked with meditation before, and we talk about mental health on this podcast a lot. I mean, how has that work affected you on the court as well as in your profession?
I mean, it's a dramatic difference. Like meditating, I started meditating 15 years ago. And I won't really go, I meditate twice a day. I always meditate once a day. Sometimes I miss the second one. But if I have anything to do at night, I'm going to make sure I do that meditation in the afternoon. Like when we're done with this podcast, I'm going to go right on the couch over there and meditate before I head home. I'm in my office. It's just, it breaks the loop, the cycle. We all have this, we all have a series of loops running in our brains. And yeah, people who play a lot of sports or compete at a high level, as you guys do, sometimes those are empowering thoughts on a loop, but often the thoughts that are really on a loop are these kind of critical ideas about ourselves, or these fears, right? These worries, these existential thoughts. And for me, meditation kind of just is a little reset in the day to just break that cycle and kind of start fresh. People sometimes want to sell other folks on this stuff, and they say like, it's a 100%, you'll be all better. You'll never have, no, that's all bullshit. But for me, if it makes it like 80, 85% better, that's just such a giant win. And if you can string some wins together, suddenly you're really going. And so for me, like meditation, journaling, making sure, even like I'm injured now, I can't play. I haven't been able to play for a few weeks. It's driving me crazy, but I go get cardio every single day. I do weights 4 days. Like I find a way, because I've decided that for me, I'm going to say I've had a good day. Because we all don't, if you don't define things, maybe it's harder to quantify. So for me, if I've spent time with the people I love, I've journaled, meditated, and exercised during a day, I've had a good day. And I just try to kind of put that stuff in. And it's like, family, loved ones, exercise, meditation, journaling. Okay, I've won. And then if I can eat well on top of it, you know what I mean? Eat right.
Yeah, that's a cherry on top.
Yeah. That's winning a 5-setter. You know what I mean? Perfect.
No, it's funny. I mean, as you go through a career from juniors to pros, and I'm actually getting back on tour myself right now.
Oh, that's awesome, man.
Yeah. So it's been, getting back to the foundation and making sure that, I'm not playing at the moment necessarily in these tournaments, but how do I build that foundation and get that routine going is so, so crucial for me getting back on tour. How do you do that
from that? So like, living like, that thing of rebuild, we've all had these moments. Anyone who's tried to chase a career that's got the kind of funnel that the one you're trying to have and have had, and the one I've been lucky enough to have, there are real setbacks. There are real moments when it seems like you're not going to get to that place. And the hardest thing, I think, is when you retrench, when you have to say, okay, this is where I am right now. So, and now I know what this is going to cost me. It's going to cost me so much. How much are you talking about? I know it costs a lot financially, but I'm talking about the other costs, right?
Emotionally.
A big cost emotionally to go, okay, what is that process like for you right now? So are you going to go play challenge? Like, what are you going to go to go play?
I mean, initially the process starts with, do I want this? You could say you could say you want it, and you can think about it, and it's easy when you watch the US Open. You're like, yeah, I would like to be there. Well, yeah, obviously you would like to be there, like that's the easy part. Then it gets down to, okay, it's been a long day. Do I go do the 3 other things that I have to do for my body? Okay, now I'm there. Okay. In my maturity stage that I'm in now, after playing for, let's say 6 years on tour, tennis has the most variables out of any other sport in the world, nearly out of the top sports in the world. So it's incredibly unstable. So how do you create stability? How do you create routine when everything else has gone to shit, for lack of a better term? When you're traveling for 24 hours, when you're on the road, your body feels awful, you're dehydrated, you don't have anything. Okay, like you said, you make sure to get meditation in. That's just how you kind of recenter yourself. Okay, I meditate, I make sure I get my yoga in, I do my workout, and okay, I feel that sense of home again. So for me, probably 3 years ago, even when I was around 100 in the world, was I doing that every day? Probably not. Was I doing that every other day? Hopefully.
Because you know what? Part of it is, though, also, it's like, I think I've found this, that it's very scary to go all in fully. Actually, because then the fear is, what if I do all that and I'm not enough? But you have to find a way to go all in fully, especially then, because you'll know something about yourself. And in fact, you will be enough, whether you become top 20 or not. you will have learned a great, valuable thing about how resilient you are and how much you're willing to put on the line. But it's really hard. It's like the salesperson who, before the biggest opportunity, they don't want to prep because the fear, they don't know this, but the fear is, if I fucking don't prep and I don't get it, okay, I'm an asshole. But if I prep and I don't get it, I'm a failure. And that failure thing is really scary.
Such an ego hit. It's funny. I've been working with juniors now, and the word that we use in the tennis world really is depressurization. What can I put out there into the universe so people know I'm not 100%? You know, I'm not ready.
But you gotta, but the truth is,
then you'll never get to that potential.
Did seeing all those guys do well light a fire for you, who are your peers?
Well, it's funny. We brought this up before. The co-host is Mike Cation, and we talked about this, and people have come up to me because I'm friends with Chris. And,
of course you are. No, you must.
And but they're like, well, Chris did it, can't you? And I'm like, well, he's 6'9". I'm 5'9". So it's funny when they just kind of relate that. But of course, I mean, seeing people grown up with, yes, 100%.
But there is something about seeing your peers, because you've definitely beaten Chris in your life, right?
100%. Yes.
You've taken sets from him. You guys, yes, whatever. You know his game. Like, yes, he might be at this moment playing better than you. And yes, he might have certain tools that are very, you know, there aren't that many people who have that physical thing and are also as smart as he is. Like, he's got the whole package in a lot of ways, right? So, but I imagine, I remember the scripts I read where I was like, oh, you know what? Maybe I can. I'm not saying I'm that great, but I think maybe I can do this. Like, because that's a human. I suddenly realized it's not magical people; they're human beings who have maybe honed a special part of themselves. Like,
I think for me, it was always an overthinking, was like, oh, I have to do something miraculous, where luckily I have some skill that's very unique. And then it's just about keep doing it. Just put it out there each and every day, which I think I got complacent at a certain time. And that's what I needed the break and coming back to it. But it's realizing
I'm sure that being top 100 felt to you at the time like, oh, fuck, I'm stalled. Then now you're probably like, you know, top 100 is kind of amazing.
It was more I was going for a different goal at the time. You know, I think it was different goals and things get blurry. I'm sure you have it in your own profession where, you know, the goals are not the goals you once had and you're kind of doing it for the wrong reasons. Everybody has in their own profession. And then it was like taking a step back. Oh, do I even enjoy this? What am I getting out of this? You know? And then once I did that, I was like, no, that's on that tennis court is where I'm 100% myself. You know, that's where I find myself.
You feel like you're working from the place where you're most alive. See, if you can do the thing where you feel like you're working from the most alive part of yourself in your work, you know, there obviously is a part of yourself with those you love, but I'm saying the most alive part of yourself that can exert itself in a professional context, and you can do a thing and be one of the best in the world at it. It's like that calling, and you're still young enough. How old are you?
27.
Right. You're still in the way tennis works now.
The prime.
You know, not in Johnny Mac obviously retires then, but the way it is now, you have 10 years where you could get to that A+ level of tennis, right? That's super exciting. And
you have to commentate. You have to commentate. You know that, right? Like this is the way you speak about tennis is probably one of the best like non-professional guests that we've had. The passion you have for it and the way you see it is so unique as well.
Thanks. Well, you know, when you're a writer and you study this stuff and I love tennis, right? I've made stuff about it. I've spent hours thinking about it. Also, you know, I've gotten like last year, I've spent a lot of time with Mark Lucero and hit with Mark a bunch. And so you talk to guys like Mark and BG and Mark did a really scary thing for me. How's this? Especially recognize that you're my age. So I'm shooting it. You'll like this. No, I'm shooting in LA, outside of LA. I'm shooting like an hour and a half outside of LA. And, you know, Mark has a wonderful podcast that he did for a while and he listened a lot to mine and we would talk online over the years. And then when I was in LA for 6 months, so we hung out a bunch and played a bunch. And it was great getting to hit with him and talk about tennis. And I was shooting somewhere kind of near where his place was. And he's like, oh, a friend of mine has a court near where you're shooting. If you want to come play, I'm hitting with somebody. And then if you want to come play. So I'm like, yes, I'll bring my stuff. We're shooting at this kind of location I have to stay at for a couple of days, a hotel kind of place. And so I have my stuff and I go over. And as we're walking to the court, Mark's like, oh, hey, I'm glad you're here, that we're going to hit. Just so you know, Tracy Austin I think might stop by to watch you hit. And I was like, oh, that's funny, dude.
Yeah,
hilarious.
good one.
And he goes,
Yeah.
no. And then, 5 minutes later, we're hitting, and Tracy comes walking out to watch us hit. And it was so intense for me because we're the same. I mean, I was right there at the Open when she won, when she was 16. And
now your grip is tightening up on the forehand.
Yeah. But it was awesome too, because this is the great thing about tennis. People, about anyone who's like so great at it. I walk off the court and Mark had played, like, he fed me the ball in the right spots. I hit the ball. I was cracking the forehand as well as I can crack it. But it was great because I walked off the court and Tracy was just like, oh, it was really fun. You can play. That's great. I was like, thanks. She goes, I mean, do you want me to tell you anything I noticed? I was like, that's all I want in the world. And she just broke down. She was like, come here. And she stood me a certain way and talked to me about the way I was rotating into the ball. And it was incredible. It was such a gift that she gave me. And like, of course, that she watched with the eye that she has, and couldn't help, right? Everyone says still to this day, nobody hits the ball in. I'm sure you probably had the chance to hit with her in your life. Like,
actually haven't, but yeah, heard amazing things. Yeah.
That's sweet. They all say that she hits the ball in the most center part of the racket every single time. Johnny Mack, people say that about too, but Tracy, they really say like she never ever I guess she just never ever misses,
Yeah.
But it was incredible, and that's part of it. Is I get to talk. Like, part of the luck of my life in this is I get to learn from experts and all these things. And if it's something I love, like tennis, any chance I get to talk to, like, Patrick will say, I never take advantage, but Patrick will be like, come hit for an hour. And, you spend 5 minutes with Patrick and he's going to tell you 3 things that honestly will just completely change the way that you hit the ball. If you're at my level, like at your level, it's different, right? The refinements are so, but at my level, if someone says, like, if Patrick goes, listen, you just basically, not when you're trying to take it on the rise or come in, but if you could just think about, basically, if you can, you always want to hit the ball at the same height. And it's not the kind of thing amateur tennis players think about.
No.
And he's like, look, here's the thing about your footwork. Get in position so that where you're hitting the ball is basically in your favorite spot every time. And you're not going to get that every time. But if you're thinking of, and it's like, of course. Or like Brad will say, all right, when you run around your forehand, I've noticed that sometimes you run around your forehand, you run around your backhand to hit your forehand, and you like that inside out shot, and that's great. But if you're going to do that against the guy of your level or a little better, and you don't try to hit that forehand super hard to like take super control, he goes, I know why you don't. You run around it and you think it's great, like you want to get in a rally. And he's like, no, when you run around that, that's your opportunity. You're going to do it. You got to commit to fucking hitting the ball, because otherwise a decent player is going to just put the ball down the line. Now you're running after it and he's going to put the next ball away. But it's things like, and if you just get those little spots from really smart people about the game, noticing your game, like if I didn't take advantage of learning and remembering and blocking it, I would be wasting this amazing opportunity that I have to get better and to access these incredible minds, and this experience that people like Mark and Brad and Tracy have,
No, it's amazing. I don't want to take too much more of your time. I have just a couple quick questions.
Go ahead, do your thing. We're totally talking tennis, man.
It's amazing. I love that. This is totally separate. I want to bring it back to kind of the film industry a little bit.
Yeah,
great. There's always been kind of a divide between TV, movies, and where has your love kind of, and obviously now we're in this like really TV centric era of just putting out stuff, but where has your love kind of shifted throughout that?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I think the first movies that I really watched and cared about were like with my dad, and they were on TV, right? My dad would show me. I mean, you grew up on Long Island, so did I, and I, my dad and Saturday afternoon, we would the Mets would suck or whatever, the Yankees at various times, and we would just turn on. He would put on some old Westerns, and that's probably in like The Godfather, gangster films. But I will say, yeah, I grew up memorizing movies for sure, but I read a lot. Like I was a big reader. So like reading and books and movies and music, I mean, all those things were like one thing to me. And it wasn't really about the format so much. I would say movies were at a certain point, I studied them, not like an academic. I studied them as an enthusiast, right? And then, of course, you have an academic's understand as you really study it, and you're like, maybe I want to do this different. But then dialogue on television, there have always been shows that were incredible, like NYPD Blue or Aaron Sorkin shows, or David Kelly shows. So I always would like have something in that area that was, great. But most of my career was spent in the movies. Dave and I, that's what we mostly did, with a couple of detours toward TV until this opportunity. The world kind of changed. You could tell these novelistic stories on TV. And there was like an opening to tell the kinds of stories we would tell in a film on TV, and to be able to tell it in longer form. And so you have to jump at that opportunity. And it's been awesome getting to make television this way.
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll make movies also. Like, we love doing both things, and certain stories present in certain ways and you get drawn to them. That's, I would say, about all this stuff, and it applies in tennis too. Like, you need your intellect to kind of process and understand a bunch of stuff about it. But then when you're executing all of it, you don't really want your intellect involved at all. And so even in like when I'm writing, of course I've synthesized and processed a bunch of information, but like when I'm doing the thing, or even when Dave and I are figuring out, what is this, a movie, or that is not really an intellectual exercise. That's like, what does this feel like? What does this want to be? How is it kind of naturally evolving? And that's kind of like more how that stuff goes. So I don't really separate it out. It's not like, Craig Shapiro deciding that there's only tennis and no pickleball, which I agree. I agree with Craig, by the way. There is no pickleball. If I had one, if I have a logo. I mean, I'm sure when I'm 70, but I just can't do it yet. Do you play? You must. You guys play.
So during this break, I actually played, like, quote unquote professionally for a little bit of time. Recreationally, it's so much fun because my home friends that don't play tennis won't get in the court with me because they're like, "Oh, you're too good." I'm like,
"Yeah, but we can make it on the court with you at pickle either, obviously."
But obviously I'm still playing at 20%, but it's still, at least for whatever, it's that scare factor. It's not in pickleball, where in tennis they won't. I mean, it's been years. I've known these kids since I was 2 years old. And still, they've gone on the court twice with me, because it's that.
Why? Wait, are they not tennis players at all? Or they?
No, they're not. I mean, they picked it up because of me, and just they supported me. And then, but for them, it's like, you're going to blow me off the court. I hear this all the time. I'm like, I'm not getting on the court.
Well, but
to
also
beat you. It's not my practice.
Yeah, it misunderstands the whole thing. I mean, I think, but so they're not even like 4, because anyway, even a 4-0.
Oh, no. These are beginners, but they just never really evolved. And now they're playing a little bit more, but pickleball has overtaken because it's that scare factor that's not in pickle. It's in tennis, where if you get through it and you get, like what we talked about in the beginning of this, that first hit, when you make that first connection well on a tennis court, it's a drug. I mean, that there's really not that feeling in pickleball, which was a big reason that I didn't like it.
Because in ping pong, there is. Like in ping pong, you do have those moments.
You do. It's the material of the wiffle ball with the racket.
I mean in pong? Like in ping pong, if you in ping pong, you can actually
you can connect
have
and
these moments where you feel like you've done it. Pickle's not like that. It's dead.
Quite this. It's a little deadened. Where yes, there are times where I hit a shot, I'm like, okay, felt okay, but it's not that same like wow.
Do you play padel? I've heard padel's the most fun. I haven't played it yet.
Pretty amazing. I used to play. We went to the Federation. We went over to Barcelona before some of the clay court tournaments, and we didn't even really know what it was at the time. And we were playing 6 hours a day of tennis and fitness after that, and would still play padel. It's amazing. It's truly amazing. But
my friend's son is this incredible padel. This kid, he's your age, Jordan. Okay, you ever come across him? He was a squash, like number 1 squash player.
Oh, okay, yes.
He's your age. And now he's a padel fanatic, and
it's amazing.
Sammy, my son's played with him and said it's just the greatest thing.
It's the greatest thing. You have a few squash players that went to pickle, but padel that's the one. It won't ever be as accessible as pickle. It won't blow up like recreationally because there's a financial interest as well of getting on a court. It's very expensive, but once you're playing it, it's something special. It really, it's a lot of fun.
How often are you playing tennis now, Noah, as you're preparing?
I'm about probably 4 days a week, getting the body in. Within probably a few weeks from now, I'll be full time and getting it ready. So the
And
body's
how
there.
long does it take? I want to ask you. How many?
No, please.
How long does it take you to really feel like, for you, meaning obviously you're always on the level of but for you, how long does it take for you to really feel like, okay, I have control of the sword now. Like I really understand. I can do what I want to do.
There's two levels. There's the practice and the competition. You know, the practice one, you have, and it's always the worst feeling. So you get there, you're a few weeks in, and for a second, you almost forget that you're good at tennis. And then a few weeks in, you're like, wow, okay, I'm okay. Feels good. And then you hit that mark, you're like, I'm in. Then you play the tournament and you're like, okay, I'm not in. Okay, I'm not in. And then you understand that the pressure is relying to it. You're not at that level where you are blind trusting your forehand or your backhand. You know, for me, it's always going to be my backhand. You put a gun to my forehead, I'm making it in the court. The forehand's the one that, you know, the tightness gets there, decelerate, accelerate, over accelerate. But then I'm probably about a month and a half of real good work in to be like, okay, let's go compete. So that's
the place where you're
it.
like, I want to hit the overhead. Like, come on, I'm ready. Like, I want at 30, the back of the court,
break point. I'm going for my shot. Yes. That's about a month and a half. Yes.
That must be a great feeling when, and it's like, yeah, let's go.
Oh, the first 2 weeks, though, it's so painful. You're like, did I ever play this sport well? And I'm sure everybody's felt it different. I'm sure you felt it coming back after such a long time.
Well, when the serve, when suddenly you're against, like, because even your serve kind of comes, but the returning in competition, I'm sure at your level, it suddenly must feel like, because in practice, no one's really cracking it like Ben Shelton, and suddenly you got to return Ben's serve, and it must just be like, what the fuck do I do with this?
It is a little bit. You turn around, you're like, okay, I'm playing Isner right now. He's serving from 3 treetops away. Okay, let's go. Come on.
I've never asked anyone this. So I've never asked anyone this. They're like, okay, Isner specifically. Like, yes. I remember when he won in Cincinnati. I remember when he first won the Cincinnati. I remember all of it. When I got 2 things. One, the first time you face a serve like that, and no one can really describe to you exactly what that's like if you're beforehand, right?
Sure.
Is it demoralizing at first? Are you just like, I'm not going to be able to get this back for the whole set? Or like, how does it, or are you thinking like, okay, what can I do? Do you enter a state of strategy? Like, what do I do right away?
Yeah,
how does it work?
There's a few different ones. So, I've played guys like Eubanks or Opelka in the juniors and throughout when we play challengers together. And that was one level, obviously. So Opelka has been dealing with a lot of injuries, so I didn't get to feel his. But then I started seeing, it was 2018, kind of when I was hitting my peak there. I played Isner, then Nick Kyrgios, and then Isner. So yeah, I was like back to back, played Isner at the French first round. And I remember early on, obviously, you've watched him, but early on, the first one goes and you laugh and you're like, okay, there's not, it's just a knee jerk, like New York reaction. I'm like, you gotta be fucking kidding me. Like, well, is this real?
That's hilarious.
And then, so luckily, I played him at French. It was a smaller stadium. They actually, the newest one that they built all the way in the back, probably holds about 2,500. I had a decent amount of room. And then I played him at Washington, D.C., the ATP there, had a lot of room. So after a while, I started understanding that I'm fast. My skill speed. That's it. Yeah, so I actually wasn't guessing on any serves. I was actually reacting. I was so far back that I saw the serve and would physically run after it, which is not anything that should be taught ever on a return.
Well, you're operating on a different level. You're on a different level. It doesn't matter.
Level. Like, so I was literally, I would see the serve and then I would turn like I was a sprinter and run after it. This was no reaction. This was actually seeing it.
And because he wouldn't give it away, right? When it was in the at the height, you couldn't really.
He had a perfect toss.
Right. The toss is too. You can't get anything off the toss.
Not one.
Like at my level, obviously, even a 5-0, I'm going to get stuff off the toss very often when I'm playing against someone better than me. But at that level, you can't. So then at 5'9",
yes,
when he or Riley hit that huge second serve kick,
yes.
What the fuck? Are you just always hitting it above your head on the backhand, like above your head?
I mean, everything's always above my head, but that's besides the point. I mean, yeah, it's really difficult. And then it's about changing court position. How do I mess with that? How do I switch it up every time? And I had 6 or 7 set points, lost 6 and 4 to him in French. Got my redemption in DC where I had the opportunity. So that was on clay, which for a lot of people, they actually wouldn't notice this. It's actually much tougher. The ball bounces even higher on the clay.
serve is worse on clay.
Much worse.
And his second serve is brutal. That he kicks it up above, over. I'm 6 feet. It would be above. I mean,
I am in the bleachers, in the stands, trying to get this, literally laughing. But yeah, so again, I was 15, 20 feet behind the baseline. And one of them, luckily enough, I got an ESPN top plays. I got to find it. I'll send it to you. I literally hit this ball. He drop shot, and I'm just running. I am 20 feet behind the baseline, darting to this drop shot. Happened to break a shoe that match, but this is what it was. It was just the battle of, he's 6'11",
and you're,
and that's it. It was just every shot. I'm up here. I'm 10 feet, 20 feet behind the baseline. But this is tennis. I mean, this is, as much as that's obviously an offensive weapon, I would love to have it. The fact that could be on the same playing field and it's one-on-one. And I have a picture of me and him high-fiving at different places and other guys, and Eubanks, putting his hand in front of my face after, I took him out and I saved a match point, but his hand is the size of my face. Like, the fact that this neutralizes everything, that's the beauty of tennis. I mean, that's
Michael Chang. I mean, that's Michael Chang. That's Harold Solomon. If I can get one closer to your,
yes, of course,
to, you actually are there's a lot of that stuff, right?
100%. Let me get one more question before you go. Totally. This is just for me. I don't even care for the podcast. On a show like Billions, scripted show like that, how much is improvised? How much do you let the actors kind of take, or is it none at that point?
Zero.
Truly
zero. If an actor wants to talk, we give the scripts. We always, they would have the scripts at least a week before shooting each episode, often, most of the time, way more than that. So if any of the actors had a question about a line or an idea, happy to talk about it and make changes. Also, in the morning, every day you go to set, the routine, like the tennis routine, the routine is you go to set, and the first thing you do each day is what's called a blocking rehearsal. Everyone goes to where they might be, or with the director, and you're kind of walking through how the scene is going to be shot. And during that, you're saying the words, the actors are saying the words. David and I are there, along with this woman named Beth Schachter, who's our number 2 on the show, is amazing. And we're not there. She can do the job for us instead of us. But you're there and you're listening. And so you might notice, there could be a better tag at the end of this scene, or in this moment, we need something funnier. And you could Dan Soder is a great comedian and he plays Mafi on the show. So once in a while we might say to Dan in that early rehearsal, I might say to Dan, or they might, hey dude, if you have something occurs to you to say something funny in that spot, try it here in this rehearsal. Let's see.
Gotcha.
And then if he does, we'll put that in the script for that day. We'll just go to the script supervisor, give her, hey, add this line in this spot. This is what this should be. But even that maybe 4 times over the course of 7 seasons. And there really isn't, it's not the kind of show, because the way David and I write and the rhythm of that is so particular. And the way the jokes work and just the whole thing. So it's tightly scripted and everybody kind of signs on for it. But I don't want to short shrift it. That reason we give the actors the scripts early is because if Paul Giamatti calls, he's like, hey, can we talk about this scene? I don't understand X, Y, or Z. He's a really smart guy. Smarter than anyone I've ever met. If Paul didn't understand a line, it's because the line's fucked up. And then it's okay, well, let us try something else. We'll try to fix it, make it better. So you're constantly working. We are constantly rewriting ourselves. So we're trying to rewrite ourselves enough up to the point so that nobody feels the need to change it. I think on broad comedies, it's different, and people work different ways.
Like the Curb Your Enthusiasms of the world and stuff like that.
That's awesome. That's incredible. It's not my skill set. I live in our skill set is something different than that. We just know know the thing that we do, and that's what we do. I have one question for you, which is tennis goes through these phases, and do you find it interesting that how much people deploy slice shots now, when for so long it was don't slice your backhand ever, but everyone got so acculturated to topspin shots that now it's not just changes of pace. People are really trying to drive slices and sometimes off both wings. How do you
it's the evolution of the sport. Watching it's funny. We're working on a docuseries ourselves for Behind the Racket right now. And
Awesome.
With the director of Rex Miller did a few Citizen Ash, and like rewatching that and watching Arthur Ashe and the speed of that, like history is going to repeat itself for different reasons, but it keeps coming back to the same point. And this one, the players are getting too athletic and the ball's coming too fast. There's going to be a point, and which we're getting very close, if not there already, that it is too fast. And that's what you're seeing. So we're not getting, a lot of players are starting to realize it's like, okay, I'm not going to win or lose this match by how fast I hit this ball. And now it's getting back to, okay, we're slicing. Now you're seeing an Alcaraz coming up to the net more. Now you're seeing drop shot. It's just this rewiring of saying, okay, we're getting back to this point because the balls we're just too quick. I don't want to play this way.
All right, last thing, I'm leaving. Last thing. Where do you, I mentioned a 27-year-old's take on this actually. Where do you have Pete and Andre in your top 10 all time?
It's always that. Do I hate
where do you have
all-timers?
Where do you have Pete?
I think Pete, with the technology that we have today, is still a top 5 server of all time. It's so tough. I would say that if he played on tour today,
with all the tools,
with all the tools that he available. Has now. Oh God, because whatever I say, somebody's gonna hate it. I think he would still be top 30 in the world, though. I think even with his serve and volley, with how returners have gone so incredibly, but he was gifted. He had a view for tennis that people didn't have. Agassi was one that I think if he monitored his game, I think it has actually more potential now than Pete's game would have.
Well, his ground strokes were insane. Because, okay,
his
so you
timing.
So wait, the three guys are not, I'm not going to make you sit.
All timing.
Obviously, the three guys are the top 3 all time. There's no question about that anymore.
No question about it.
But I have Pete at 4.
Pete at 4.
I pick Pete at 4 if I take it all in. What do you think?
I haven't gone through the rankings in a bit. I would put him top 10. I don't have it. I think 4 is a little high in my book. There's guys. Yeah, we were talking about this, and there's like players and different generations.
But would you put Murray? Would you put Murray ahead of Pete?
Would
you think Murray, like mental toughness?
I would put Murray. I would put Murray ahead of Pete.
Wow, that's amazing.
I know
really?
What Murray has done against what we consider the best tennis players of all time to get back-to-back goals, to come through that. He's underrated. Stan Wawrinka at his peak is underrated. You're talking about, and then go back in time. You have Marat Safin, you have players like that. You're like, where?
Yeah, I remember all those. Of course.
It's so tough. Of course. It's so tricky. I've hit with Johnny Mack countless times. Where's Johnny Mack? Where does he
he's
settle?
The most talented. Well, the thing about Johnny Mack is because that Johnny Mack's, like, just his hands being the best in history, still clear best in history.
It's unbelievable what he can do with a tennis ball.
But of course, if he had, but also he was such a gifted athlete that he never really he practiced, but he never had to practice. He just had to play. This is the best shape. Played.
As I would say, probably 5 years ago was like the best shape he was ever. He was saying, if I was in this shape when I was playing, I'd play another 10 years. He's in the best shape now, but the way he sees tennis, like I was serving, he was on court, and he's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, what are you talking about? I thought those were pretty good. He's like, that one was like 2 inches off. That was 3 inches off. Not only does he say that, he then goes and he hits the line 3 times in a row without even a thought. So it's like, I could call bullshit on him, but he just proved it to me. So who am I to say that he's doing the wrong thing?
Everybody I've spoken to, any pro I've spoken to who's gotten a hit with Johnny Mack in the last 10 years says they're just like, now he's my favorite. So Johnny Mack is my favorite player of all time. Personal favorite. Yes. He's my number one favorite tennis player. I'm not saying he's the best. I'm not. I know. But he's my personal favorite tennis player of all time. So yeah, everyone just says it's the craziest thing.
That's amazing.
I got to hit with him just once when I was very young. Because I was at the tennis camp. So okay, last thing. I was at tennis camp. And it was like, this is the thing that would always happen to me. Basically, I was in the top section. There were like the top 50, 500 kids in the camp. So the 50 kids were in the top section. I was probably the number 48 out of the 50. but all the kids in the top section got to just hit with John for 10 minutes, you know?
Yeah.
And so I got this like little moment. And because I was a wise ass who was going to become what I became, I said to John, I go, hey, buddy, you think you could ace me? And I was 14 and the whole camp gathers around. And John's like, yeah, bud, I think I can. And he hit seven serves. And I didn't even touch. No, I didn't even, the racket never touched the ball. Because the spin. I mean,
yeah,
he would just
100%.
He would just completely do ping pong serves to me. I mean, it was like the ball would bounce and just take off in a direction I could never anticipate.
That's very funny.
All right, no, we got to hit though, dude. I did this.
Brian, I was bringing it up. You let me know what your schedule is like. Randall's Island, done. Set it up. I'm good.
I mean, that's gonna happen. Like I'm definitely gonna take you up on it. All right, man.
But then I'm also gonna bring Johnny Mac on. You have to say the same thing that you said while you were at camp. You have to
absolutely.
Yeah, 100%. I'm not letting you go with that. You have to ask him to ace you again.
Oh, that's interesting. If he served 7 at me now, I would get my racket on 1.
I think so. No,
I don't know if I'd get it back. I would get a racket at 7.
You don't trust?
I would get a racket.
You're getting one back for sure. I'm putting money in that. I mean,
he's not 20 years old anymore.
He's serving pretty well, but I'm more that your skill has increased at a level that it needs to be.
My skill is much different than it was back then. All right, man.
Brian, thank you so much for being on. This was amazing. One of my favorite guests.
What a blast.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
We'll talk soon.
Bye.
The show might be over, but the conversation isn't. Join us on social media at Noah Rubin 33, at Mike C Tennis, and at Behind the Racquet.
Expect new episodes every Monday or Tuesday. And don't forget to leave us a rating on iTunes. It really helps us expand and reach more listeners as we take you behind the racket.